Hi there everyone, Mychal A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and today we're going to dive into the Capricorn Ingress chart for the year of 2026. Now, when we take a look at the Capricorn Ingress chart, we are doing that with the anticipation of having some insight into the concrete events that will manifest within a particular country for the year ahead. And I say for the year ahead from the perspective of the calendrical year ahead. So we're doing the Capricorn Ingress. We know that the Capricorn Ingress of the Sun, or when the Sun enters the sign of Capricorn, is essentially roughly around December 20th or December 21st. And therefore, as a result of that, this chart is going to give us an insight into the entire year between the Capricorn Ingress of 1 year, which is December 21st of 1 year, to approximately December 21st of the following year. And since December is the month that comes before January, we tend to look at this as a year ahead tool. Now, one of the things that's interesting with the Capricorn Ingress chart is that in Uranian astrology, the Capricorn Ingress chart is held as being the predictive chart for the entire year ahead. Whereas in traditional astrology, the Capricorn Ingress chart is only thought of as being a chart between the Capricorn Ingress of the Sun and the Aries Ingress of the Sun. Therefore, from a traditional astrological perspective, the Capricorn Ingress should give us insight into the next quarter of the year, which would be essentially from December 21st to March 21st. So we're essentially looking at the 3-month period of January, February, March, when we take a look at the Capricorn Ingress from a traditional perspective. And in traditional astrology, the Aries Ingress chart is held as being the chart that has more of a sway over the entire year. And even within that, there are some complications, because within the Aries Ingress chart, for example, if we have a fixed sign on the cusp of the ascendant for that specific chart, then that chart is thought to hold sway over the entire year. So if we have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius rising on the cusp of the Aries Ingress chart, then that chart is thought to be a year-long chart. Whereas if we have a movable or a cardinal sign rising, and the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, then that chart is thought of as being a chart that only is going to signify that season, that 3-month period. So if we have Aries rising on the cusp of the Aries Ingress chart, then we would use that chart to really give us insight into the entire year, essentially, because we're still using that as a predictive model for the entire year, but more specifically to give us insight into the interval of time between the Sun's ingress into Aries and the Sun's ingress into Cancer. So if I have a cardinal sign rising on the cusp of my Aries Ingress chart, then I will use that chart to give me insight into that quarter, and then I will break down the year into quarters by looking at the Cancer Ingress for the summer season, then looking at the Libra Ingress for the autumn, then looking at the Capricorn Ingress for the winter. And this, once again, is only if I have a cardinal sign rising on the cusp of my Aries Ingress chart from a traditional astrological perspective. And then finally, if I have a mutable sign, so Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, if I have a mutable sign that's rising on the cusp of my Aries Ingress chart, which is the chart that we cast for the day that the Sun ingresses into Aries, then that chart is thought to be viable for 6 months. So for a half of the year, essentially. So this is how we've thought about this, traditionally speaking. Fixed sign rising on the cusp of your Aries Ingress chart, it's good for the entire year. Cardinal sign rising on the cusp of your Aries Ingress chart, you have to cast a chart every 3 months for every season. Mutable sign rising on the cusp of my Aries Ingress chart is good for 6 months, for half of the year. Now, I don't know about all that Really? I can only tell you what the people said hundreds of years ago, but I don't know about all that. I don't know if I buy that because at the end of the day, we're still going to use that Aries Ingress chart to give us insight into the entire year. And I think what's interesting is that within this idea of subdividing the year into quarters or what have you, it it gives us the ability to study periods of time in a more nuanced way. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're casting an Aries Ingress chart, you're casting the Aries Ingress chart with the anticipation of that chart being your chart for the entire year. Regardless of whether or not you subdivide it, it's kind of like if you're doing tarot and you pull one card and that card represents the overview of the situation, and then you pull out individual cards to represent different parts of the situation. It's the same thing. You would use the Aries Ingress chart as an overview of the entire year, and then you could subdivide that 20 different ways from Friday, and you will essentially get more insight into the periods of time that you're investigating. Now, this idea of using the Aries Ingress chart as the chart for the astrological new year is because the ancients felt as if when the sun ingressed into Aries, that was the beginning of the year. That was essentially the end of winter and the return of life, basically, the return of the sun being predisposed to delivering life to us. We know that when the sun is ingressing into Aries, we find ourselves in a state of time where the days are getting longer and the nights are getting shorter until from the first day of spring to the first day of summer, we have the longest day at summer. The winter solstice, rather, is representing this period of time where the sun is essentially at its standstill, where we have the longest night ever. And after that, the nights decrease their length until we end up on the first day of spring, where we have equal day and equal night. That's what equinox means. Equinox means equal night. So we have equal periods of time. Now, the ancients felt as if that first day of spring should rightfully represent the start of the new year. However, Alfred Witte and this band of cronies, I'm joking, because I'm one of them, but Alfred Witte was of the impression that no, we shouldn't begin the year, the astrological year, once the sun has already moved one quarter through his journey, basically, but rather we should begin the astrological new year from the point at which the sun is on his lowest point, because that would represent his journey back upward towards the vernal equinox. So here on the screen, we have essentially a diagram of the sun on his journey on the ecliptic, which we know is the path of the sun. And this is going to be our ecliptic. And then we have the sun's relationship to the celestial equator, essentially. And so basically, Alfred Witte and his band of Uranian astrologers was of the opinion that it made more sense to start the astrological year at the point of it being the longest night, because this is the sun essentially as far away from where he wants to be as possible. Because if we consider the sun's ingress into Cancer to represent the longest day, then when he's in Capricorn, this is the longest night. And Alfred Witte thought that it made more sense to start the astrological new year when the sun was at the bottom of his journey in relation to the ecliptic and in relation to this period of longest day, than to when he was here at Aries, which would represent the sun being one quarter of the way along on his journey. Now, I think this is one of those situations where we say, okay, what's the most accurate thing to do? Should we stick with tradition on this one? Tradition being we use the Aries Ingress chart to represent the entirety of this year? Or should we use this idea of starting from the bottom, which is essentially starting from the beginning as far as Witte is concerned? Because here at this period of longest night, this is the point at which the days start to increase. This is the point at which daylight starts to increase, not Aries. At Aries, we are already on a journey of daylight increasing. So from Aries, daylight continues to increase, but daylight didn't start to increase at Aries. Daylight started to increase after the winter solstice. So Vita said, if daylight is starting to increase here, then this should be our starting point, as opposed to Aries, where daylight has already increased to 25%. Anyway, be that as it may, the reality is Uranian astrologers use the Capricorn Ingress and traditional astrologers use the Aries Ingress. And even then, within traditional astrology, we still have a tradition of assessing the ingress chart for each of these cardinal moments of the sun ingressing into these cardinal signs. So the reality is, if we chose to do it the traditional way, we would still ultimately look at the Cancer Ingress, the Libra Ingress, the Capricorn Ingress, and then again the Aries Ingress. And similarly, even if we were to use this Capricorn Ingress only to give us insight into the next 3 months between December 21st and March 21st, the point of the matter is it still serves as a predictive tool. So with that being said, if a Uranian astrologer tells you, look at the Capricorn Ingress to give you some prognostication or some prediction for the year ahead, that person is accurate. But similarly, if a traditional astrologer tells you to use the Aries Ingress as a means of gaining insight about the year ahead, that person is also accurate. So here we have on screen the Capricorn Ingress of the Sun, and this is for December 21st, 2025 at 10:02 a.m. EST for Washington, D.C. It's impossible to cast a chart for the world. So there is no world ingress chart because every ingress chart that we cast is going to be casted for a specific location. So here we have the Capricorn Ingress of the Sun, and we're doing this for Washington, D.C. And the reason why we're doing this for Washington, D.C. is not because Washington, D.C. is the center of the world, but because Washington, D.C. just so happens to be the capital city of the United States for America. So I'm pretty sure that people in London are going to be casting the Capricorn Ingress chart for London, for the entirety of England, and people in France are going to be casting the Capricorn Ingress for Paris for the entirety of France, just because that's what we tend to do. Now, the same rules of all chart reading applies within the context of this chart reading, so we're just going to go for it. We start with the Ascendant. Now, we start with the Ascendant in the Capricorn Ingress chart because the Ascendant essentially is representing the soul of the people of the nation for whom the chart is being erected. So we start from the Ascendant, and we use the rule of this Ascendant as a means of giving us insight into what the primary concern of the people is within this coming year. And so here we see the people are represented by Saturn at 25 degrees of Pisces, 38 minutes, in the second house of the wealth of the nation. Now, the houses from a mundane astrological perspective essentially carry the same sort of meaning that they would carry from a natal astrology perspective, but we are magnifying it so that it could represent the country as opposed to it simply representing the person. So here we have the Saturn in the second house. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's something in traditional astrology known as the 5-degree rule. And the 5-degree rule states that if a planet is in the same sign as the next house cusp and within 5 degrees of the next house cusp, that planet should be considered to be in that next house. So if a planet is within 5 degrees of the next house cusp and in the same sign as the next house cusp, that planet should be considered to be in that next house. Here we have Saturn at 25 degrees of Pisces, and here we have the second house cusp at 28 degrees of Pisces. Therefore, Saturn is definitely within 5 degrees of that next house cusp. Similarly, we have Saturn in Pisces and the second house cusp in Pisces, and therefore, we can say that that part of the 5-degree rule stands as well. So even though the Saturn is physically in the first house, this Saturn has already energetically transferred his loyalties beyond the first house into the second house. So we would consider this to be a second house Saturn. Now, with Saturn in the second house, that means the people are in the second house. And with the people in the second house, that means that the people of the United States of America, within this coming period of time, are deeply concerned about the state and the welfare of their money. They care about what's going on financially within the country at this time. And this is something that is serving as the country's primary occupation as we move into 2026. What is going on with the money? How are we spending the money? Where is the money going? What are we doing? And more so, do the people of the United States of America have a clear sense of how they're both earning their money and how that money is being saved and what is happening with it? Essentially, all of these things, it's a very heavy financial sort of thing. In natal astrology, when we have the rule of the first house and the second house, it often can indicate that that person is going to be an entrepreneur. And it says that that person is going to be an entrepreneur, particularly because if the second house is the house of my money and I find myself within that second house, then it says that I am psychically constellating myself in this lifetime around the topic of my personal finances. So here we have the people of the United States of America constellating themselves psychically within the topic of their personal finances this year. Why must be the next question. Why should anybody constellate themselves so fully within the topic of their personal finances within any lifetime? Here we might say possibly because the people feel as if their money is being threatened, possibly because they feel as if they have to work that much harder within this coming year for their finances, possibly because they feel the pinch of poverty right around the corner and everybody is that much more mindful and that much more aware of how much money they're making versus how much money they're spending, because this is a period of time that really forces everybody to have a greater sense of concentration around their personal finances. All of these things can be quite true. Now, as we further investigate this, we find corroboration that the money is of central importance to the people this year because we find the part of fortune rising within the first house. When the part of fortune is rising, it's simply when anything is rising, truthfully. When anything is rising, it says that that thing is going to be a rising theme within the hearts and the minds and the consciousness of the people within the coming period of time. And what does the part of fortune represent? Money. Therefore, this is yet another indication that money is going to be of central importance for the people of the United States of America within this coming year. Money is the topic of the day. Money, 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 and more money is going to be the central topic of the day as we move into the year of 2026. Now, once again, we cannot stop asking the question why, because when we stop asking the question why, our brain turns to mush. And so we keep on asking why of this. Now we go to the second house and we start to look at the constituents of the second house. And first of all, I see that Saturn is in the second house. Now you might say, Michael, don't be an idiot. You literally just said that Saturn was the people and you've already explained Saturn as the people. That is true. But within our astrology, we know that we have a limited palette from which to describe the entire cosmos. And our limited palette consists of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, the 7 classical planets. So the planets within our chart cannot and do not have the luxury to simply represent one thing. So yes, this Saturn does represent the people because that is what he's being asked to represent within this chart by virtue of him ruling the first house. But Saturn also has to represent Saturn himself and the things that he intrinsically signifies. Now, before we move on to the intrinsic significations of Saturn, as we must, we have to also speak about the other thing within the chart that Saturn specifically signifies, because Saturn specifically signifies the people who are very much concerned about their money and their wealth and their personal finances and everything that is impacting their finances within this coming 12-month period. But Saturn is also specifically ruling the 12th house. The 12th house is the house of badness. Now, I'm specifically going to say that and leave that there because I find that people are uncomfortable with the thought of that in the year 2025. And as a result of that, we've all co-signed this grand delusion that says that the 12th house is somehow a good place to be. From a traditional astrological perspective, the 12th house is an evil house. It is possibly the most evil house of heaven, save for perhaps the 8th house, because it doesn't get much worse than death. But it is the most evil house of heaven from a traditional astrological perspective. It represents endings, since it is the last house within the sequence. It also represents our hidden enemies. It also represents our silent suffering that we can't express to anybody at all. It also represents the stupid things we do to ourselves that undermine our own efforts for happiness, health, and wholeness within this lifetime. The 12th house is an awful place to be. This 12th house has Capricorn on the cusp of it. Saturn is the ruler of this 12th house. Therefore, Saturn as the ruler of the 12th house in the 2nd house is signifying that this is a year of particular financial challenge and particular financial difficulty for the country of the United States of America. Why is that? It is that way because anywhere in our charts where we find the ruler of the 12th house is going to be an area of potent challenge within our lives, because the 12th house is an area of potent challenge within our lives. And thus, having the ruler of the 12th house in the 2nd house is representing that within this coming year, we can expect that one of the reasons why the people of America are so deeply focused on their finances is because the finances are delivering potent challenges to the lives of the people of the United States of America within this coming 12-month period. Finances is a very big topic that is going to be the topic of the day within everybody's hearts and minds, because it is going to be a very challenging area in general for the country at large. Now that we've looked at the Saturn as being a ruler of houses, i.e., I have the ruler of my 1st house in my 2nd house, and I have the ruler of my 12th house in my 2nd house. Now that we've looked at Saturn as the ruler of houses within the 2nd house, now I have to put on my other goggles, and these other goggles will look at Saturn as the ruler of nothing other than himself. So I've looked at Saturn as the specific ruler of the 1st and the 12th houses. Now I have to look at Saturn as a universal ruler of concepts and ideas that are Saturnian. So this is the difference between looking at a planet as a specific significator, i.e. the ruler of a house, versus looking at a planet as a universal significator, i.e. the ruler of himself, basically. There are certain planets that have an analogous relationship with certain houses, and certain planets that don't. Saturn in general doesn't have an analogous relationship with the 2nd house at all, because Saturn is a cold and dry, melancholic planet from the perspective of the ancients. The ancients also refer to Saturn as the author of solitariness. William Ramsay, who was a 17th century astrologer, referred to Saturn as the author of solitariness. And he's a god of poverty. Naturally speaking, Saturn is a planet that we associate with poverty. Every single depiction of Saturn that the ancients have come up with, whether it's the picture with Saturn with leprosy, or it's the picture with Saturn with the bandages all over his body, or if it's the picture with Saturn with one leg missing and an eye patch, or if it's the picture of Saturn with the water being dropped on his head and he's depressed because of it, or if it's the picture of Saturn with the starving dog, or if it's the picture of Saturn with the water goat that's outside of the actual water and having to try to climb up mountain even though it's a water goat. Every single depiction of Saturn that we see is a picture of heaviness and density and misery and poverty, and this person isn't eating enough food, therefore the dog is skinny as well. Every single picture of Saturn. Therefore, Saturn does not have an analogous relationship with the 2nd house. Now, people who might be somewhat traditional astrology adjacent might say, but Mychal, every medieval author who wrote about Saturn says that Saturn is a god of hoarding, Hoarding. Some people could hoard all they like and still be broke. And so in the case of Saturn, Saturn is most definitely a god of hoarding. He hoards when he can hoard. I just found out the other day that the hump of a camel isn't actually full of water. It's full of fat. Now, this is something that I should know because, as many of you know, I study and practice human dissection in my spare time. And I, one can look at a camel and see what it is. And if you do any amount of dissection, you have an understanding that there aren't empty spaces in the body. Basically, wherever the body has an empty space, it fills it with something. And more often than not, the thing that it's being filled with is fat. And so those humps on the back of the camel aren't just water, but they're actually filled with fat. And so the camel is a hoarder. The camel is a wonderful Saturnian creature as a beast of burden because it's a hoarder. They pee a little bit and sweat a little bit so they don't waste too much water. And when they do find themselves around a body of water, they drink it all up. They drink ridiculous amounts of water because they're desert creatures. So they know that it's probably going to be a rare thing before they find themselves surrounded by water again. And so that is Saturn. Saturn is a desert-dwelling hoarder. That sounded like I just cussed Saturn out. Saturn is a desert-dwelling hoarder. And as a result of that, this idea that Saturn naturally represents riches isn't really true because Saturn represents being in a survival mode. In the same way as that camel is in a survival mode, Saturn also is representing being in a state of survival. You know what camels eat? Cactus, cacti. Similarly, Saturn will very much be quite happy forcing all of us to eat cactus and cardboard for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because that's just the nature of Saturn. So when you have Saturn in your second house in the chart of the year ahead, that can feel like you're eating cactus and cardboard for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because Saturn does not naturally associate with the topic of wealth or with abundance. So once again, we find yet another indication that this year, money is on the mind of the people, but money might be on the mind of the people specifically because there feels as if there is a state of some recession, or it feels as if there is a state of there not being enough money to support the people of the country of the United States of America. It looks like a very recession-y sort of chart. If you ask me, if you showed me this chart and you told me this was the chart of a person, I wouldn't think that this person wasn't broke. I would think that this person was very, very, very broke. So that's the Saturn in the second house, who as a planet does not have an analogous relationship with that house at all. Now, the other thing that it's important to know about Saturn in any house is that within natal astrology, whenever we have Saturn in any house of our charts, that house is going to represent an area of highly potent learning. Now, I say highly potent learning because I think in the 21st century, we like to hear that more than we like to hear the word cursed. Nobody likes to hear that, oh, this area of my life is cursed. But traditionally speaking, that idea of a curse is essentially a place where we keep on having to learn the same lessons. And because we're not sufficiently learning those lessons, we find ourselves making the same mistakes. And that's essentially what a curse is. All a curse is something that you aren't allowing yourself to build a conscious level of wisdom around. And if you don't allow yourself to build a conscious level of wisdom around it, you're going to find yourself repeating the same unconscious patterns again and again and again and again and again. And that's what a curse is, isn't it? So it's okay once we understand the meaning of words, it's okay to say the difficult thing. And what is the difficult thing? The difficult thing is that anywhere where we find Saturn within our natal chart is going to be an area that manifests as a curse within our lives. And it will continue to manifest as a curse within our lives if we don't allow ourselves to engage in a conscious life of self-reflection. I think it was Pythagoras who said that there's nothing worse than leading an unexamined life. Because when you lead an unexamined life, all sorts of shit could happen to you because you're not paying attention. So anybody who leads an unexamined life is a person who's leading a cursed life. Because what is that curse? It's like when Voldemort went and drank the blood of the unicorn. And then the centaur said to Harry afterwards, yes, he's going to live an extended life, but he's also going to live a half-life for killing such an innocent being. Voldemort wasn't thinking about no half-life or no whole life or no any life. All he was thinking about was life, because he was in a survival mode. And more often than not, when we find ourselves living in a survival mode, we don't have time to be reflective. Who was it who said this? I think it was Firmicus Maternus who said that we don't have time to study astrology in times of war. Or, well, what he said was that now, behold, we live in an age of peace, and therefore, at this time, we can turn our attention to the study of the stars. Which, naturally, if you kind of reverse engineer that, would mean that because when there was war outside, nobody had no time to pull out their table of houses and pull out their sexagesimal calculator and pull out their, I don't know, abacus and try to calculate no positions of no planets. Because in times of war, all you can think about is your survival. So Saturn is a planet that is rooted around our unconsciousness. And therefore, Saturn, wherever it manifests within our lives, can feel like a curse, because that's an area of our lives so we only know how to say ow around. Ow, ouchie, ooh, that hurts. We only know how to say ow around the parts of our lives where the Saturn is. But the issue with that is that when you keep yourself in a state of mind where all you know how to say to something is ow, then you prevent yourself from being in dialogue with that part of your life, or you prevent yourself from creating any level of internal self-reflection around that. So yes, I say it with a broad chest that any part of our lives where Saturn is present is a part of our lives that is cursed. And if anybody has a problem with it, you send them to me. And if anybody has a problem with it, you let them listen to the entire thing, because people just like to take a soundbite. And then the soundbite becomes, oh, this astrologer said that Saturn is a curse with it. But yes, it is a curse. Because when you understand what the definition of curse is, then you understand, oh, wow. Okay, you mean to tell me that the curses in my life are the areas of my life that I'm unconsciously committing the same mistake in? Wow, okay, I see it. So if I have Saturn in my second house, that means that one of my biggest areas of learning in this lifetime is going to be my money, because without viewing that from a place of consciousness, it will be a curse for me. I'll always wonder, why don't I have enough money? Why do I always feel broke? Why does it feel like the gods are laughing at me? Why? Because you are laughing at yourself, because you aren't paying attention to that area of your life and you're performing and committing the same mistakes again and again and again. Glad to say, within this year, which part of our lives, as the people who live in the United States of America, seems to be cursed? The part of our lives that has to do with money, the financial sector once again. Now moving on, in the second house, we also have Neptune present here. When we have Neptune present within the second house, it is a toilet bowl. The 12th house is one of our toilet bowls from a traditional astrological perspective. And the ruler of the 12th house is also going to carry that same toilet energy. So we have toilet energy in the house of the money for the people of the United States of America this year. Toilet energy. Similarly, Neptune represents toilets. And we have Neptune also here within this second house, representing even more toilet energy. So our second house of money in the United States of America this year is in the state of being flushed down the toilet. If it looks like a recession, sounds like a recession, and smells like a recession, it probably is a recession. Now, another thing that I think is quite interesting from this financial sector is that we have both Saturn and Neptune present here within the second house. Do you remember 2020? Do you remember the days of COVID? What did people say was responsible for the COVID situation? It was the South Node in Capricorn, the Pluto in Capricorn, the Saturn in Capricorn, the Jupiter in Capricorn. That whole combination of planets was to blame, or people said was to blame, for the COVID situation. Saturn and Neptune There really is nothing worse than Saturn and Neptune in combination from a traditional astrological perspective, because Saturn and Neptune represent diseases of long duration. Chronic illness is what Saturn and Neptune represents. And a part of that is because Neptune represents things that weaken us, and Saturn represents the burden of time. So we have the combination for things that weaken us across a long stretch of time, which sounds like chronic illness. We don't really like Saturn and Neptune together in any sort of combination, and it does not represent a good thing at all. Similarly, Saturn represents rock. Neptune represents paper, scissors. I'm joking. But Saturn represents rock and Neptune represents the ocean. What happens when I drop a piece of rock into the ocean? Well, what happens when I drop rock into the ocean is the rock starts to get eroded and eroded and eroded until there is no more rock. What does this have to do with the price of milk in China? What it has to do with is it's saying that this combination of Saturn and Neptune in general represents the erosion of our foundation, the erosion of our baseline, the erosion of the things that we need to keep us feeling safe and secure, and just erosion, basically. Saturn, Neptune is the combination for the foolish man who built his house on the sand. It represents the foolish man who built his house upon the sand, and the rain came tumbling down and washed the house straight into the ocean, and they were never heard or seen from again. That's the combination of Saturn and Neptune. The absolute and unstoppable erosion of matter is what Saturn and Neptune represent. And where is it happening this year? In the house of our money. Thank you very much. And so this is another combination. That's an indication that this year, the country of the United States of America might find itself in a situation of some potent financial issue or hardship or what have you. Now, what else is going on from a monetary perspective? What I believe to be true in astrology is that if a chart shows you something, you keep on following it and you follow it and you follow it and you follow it until the very end. And this is what I call following the golden thread. Because if I can follow that golden thread, it's more than likely going to take me someplace that feels fulfilling, and it's more than likely going to take me someplace that feels truthful. So I keep on following and I say, okay, so if all of this is happening, where's the money of the country this year? And I go and I look for where do I find the ruler of the second house? The ruler of the second house is in the sixth house of stress and slavery and sickness. So what this could be saying is that the money of the country this year is in the house of stress this year. It's in the house of slavery this year. It's in the house of sickness this year. The money of the country is being stressed out beyond measure, is what we're seeing with this Jupiter in Cancer retrograde within the sixth house. And the money of the country might also be going towards things that have to do with the health of the country and things that have to do with the health of the people. Now, this brings us back to the people themselves, because who in this chart is representing the people? The Saturn. And who are the people conjunct? Neptune. And what does Neptune do to anybody? Neptune weakens the external boundaries that allow you to be who you are. And as a result of that, that Neptune can lead you into a state of sickness. Neptune has to do with weakening the boundaries of our personal immunity, which can therefore result in our collective unwellness. So it seems as if the money of the country this year is having a difficult time, but a part of its difficulty is because it is being used to support a sick population. Why the people are sick? Who knows? Not I, said the cat. But we do see a period of time in which it does seem as if there is a theme of sickness and money tied together, and those two things are causing us to be in a state of even that much greater financial difficulty. Perhaps we find out that there's something that is on the horizon from a health perspective, and that health thing catches the world by storm. And as a result of that, or as a result of the impact it has on the United States of America, the healthcare system in the United States of America becomes even more taxed and even more stressed out, because now we have to deal with not just the fact that it's a challenging financial year in general, but we also have to deal with it's a challenging financial year in relationship to our own health and in relationship to how we take care of ourselves. And that's even adding to the financial burden of the country. So that's what we see with the Saturn and the Neptune in the conjunction, and with the ruler of the second house in the sixth house. Now, I feel like we've sufficiently treated of this topic of the money. Another thing that we do within traditional astrology when it comes to reading into these ingress charts is that we also go and we look and see where is the moon, because the moon also represents the people in general. And where is the moon? The moon is most assuredly in the 12th house, and the moon is in Capricorn. Dorotheus of Sidon said that when the moon is in any of the domiciles of Saturn, it is as if the native's mother was a slave. Now, we have the moon in Capricorn, which is saying that we feel as if our collective great mother is a slave in such a way, whereas she does not have the resources to take care of us, to feed us, to nurture us, to clothe us, to attend to us. And as a result of that, we feel as if we are left to cater to ourselves and left to fend for ourselves. So this year is a year that is going to feel a little bit colder in terms of our ability to feel supported or taken care of by powers greater than ourselves. I remember that when I predicted that Kamala Harris was not going to win the election, and it's still on the YouTube channel. It's literally the first video when you log into the YouTube channel. It's the first thing, and I spoke about the opposition winning. So when I predicted that Kamala Harris was not going to win the election, I think that day, that election day, was also a day when there was moon in Capricorn. And as you all know, from a transit's perspective, I never talk about the moon in any sign of the zodiac because I just think that that's stupid, really, because the moon is going to be in that sign for 2.5 days and then she's going to be gone. So why should we be talking about no moon in any sign of the zodiac? So I wasn't really too keen on talking about the moon in the sign of the zodiac, but it was just interesting to me that on election day, it was moon in Capricorn or something to that effect. There was a moon in Capricorn, and I think it was that same day. And I remembered what I said was the country feels as if it's moving into a state of being unmothered. And I specifically said that because I remember people were referring to Kamala as Momala or some stupidness like that, Momala or something. And I said the country feels as if it's moving into a state of being unmothered. And so said, so done, Donald Trump won the election. And so here we are under this current administration with the moon in Capricorn for the next several months, and it doesn't feel as if we are any more in a state of being nurtured or supported or cared for from a collective perspective than we did before, basically. So I think that that's something to also be mindful of. Now, when we look at this moon, not from her universal perspective of her representing the people of the country in general, but when we look at this moon specifically from the perspective of her ruling the sixth house of this chart, we know that the sixth house is the house of sickness, and we see that the ruler of the house of sickness is opposite the country's money. Once again, why do I say opposite the country's money? Because the moon is ruling the sixth house of sickness, and it's opposite Jupiter in the sixth house of sickness, who is ruling the second house, which is the country's money. And so what does that say to me? Sickness is in a state of warfare with my money, which isn't really good for anybody. Now, clearly, I see it, you see it, we all see it, that this is a T-square between the moon and Jupiter and the Chiron. Now, I've never looked at Chiron from a mundane astrological perspective. I also don't really want to start. Yesterday, we were doing something in our research lab where we were talking about gallbladder issues, and one of the combinations that we saw happening recurrently was Mars, because we know that Mars represents Mars rules the gallbladder from a traditional astrological perspective. And one of the things we saw was Mars afflicted by Chiron in several of the gallbladder charts. And one of the students asked me, Michael, are you going to talk about the Mars Chiron? And I was like, no, girl, I don't want to talk about the Mars Chiron because ain't nobody got time for that. I don't want to add more, period. I don't want to add more. So even though we all saw Mars Chiron again and again and again and again within all of these gallbladder removal charts, leave me alone. Let me focus on the classical planets and also Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and let me build my argument based on that, because I don't want to go down the Mars Chiron rabbit hole. Similarly, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that has me talking about no Chiron in mundane astrology. There are other people for that. So I'm going to ignore this Chiron situation. However, I think it is useful for us to know that Moon Chiron as a specific combination is something that we see in the medical astrology context that has to do with stomach issues, chronic stomach problems, and who knows, maybe the issue that we're going to find ourselves facing from a health perspective that causes all of us to be spending all of our money is some chronic stomach health issue or some issue that affects the gut more than any other part of our physiological constitution. And so we're all going to need to be mindful of our stomach as we go into 2026, because it seems as if some gut-based problem is going to be the problem that is specifically affecting and impacting our health within the year ahead. And beyond this idea of the gut-based issues that the Moon Chiron represents, Moon Chiron also represents a feeling of having some major maternal wound, as if there is no maternal influence to support us as we navigate this period ahead. So it's a tricky chart, and it looks like it's going to be a tricky year, is what we can say. When it rains, it pours. You know, when it rains, it pours. Maybe you might be thinking, I hate this guy. He never says anything positive. So let's talk about some positive stuff. On the declination table, we have Mercury contra-parallel Jupiter. What does that mean? That means it's a wonderful time to go out and learn something new. Mercury-Jupiter is a combination for learning and sharing what we're learning and making money based on what we're sharing from what we've learned. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time to go out into the world and learn some new information, because Mercury has to do with information and Jupiter has to do with abundance. And the combination of Mercury-Jupiter has to do with the abundance that we gain from learning new information, which seems like a mighty fine segue into telling you that in the month of January, we have our Horary Astrology Certification course coming up at the Oraculos School of Astrology, which, as you all know, you're all invited to, and that's starting on Saturday, January 10th, 2026, and I cannot wait for you to be there. And another part of why I'm so excited about this Horary course is because the Horary program is where I teach you how to read charts like how I know how to read charts. Maybe you read charts already, and maybe you read them to your satisfaction and you don't need any more assistance in that regard. However, if you've ever seen me do a chart reading and there is a part of you that feels like, wow, I wish I could do that like that, then the only place to learn that is really with me at the Oraculos School of Astrology. And in this Horary Astrology certification, this is where I'm going to be teaching you how to not just read Horary charts in this way, but how to also read mundane charts in this way, because all I'm doing as I read this mundane chart is I'm applying Horary knowledge. So in me doing this mundane chart reading of this Capricorn Ingress for the year ahead, I am practicing level 0 astrology. There's nothing within what I'm doing that's actually any advanced astrological skills, because everything that I'm doing in reading this Capricorn Ingress chart is the bottom of the barrel level 0 astrology. A caveman could do it. Cavemen did do it because the astrology that we're doing right now is so basic. So if this version of basic is really exciting for you and you want to learn how to do this yourself, then join us in our upcoming Oraculos Horary Astrology certification, where I will teach you everything that I know about everything, about how to be an extraordinary astrologer so that you can bring these skills into your own practice. Now, coming back over here, so within this chart, it's a wonderful time to learn new skills. And I think that that also just has to do with the fact that when things are going to shit on the outside, it's a good time to diversify your own skills so that as the world is burning around you, you have things to float on. So Mercury, Jupiter, great time for learning, and we probably will see a massive influx of adult learners picking up new skills, picking up new hobbies, picking up new careers, picking up ways or finding new ways how to diversify their information and how to diversify their knowledge. And I think it is of utmost importance to do that, especially as we move towards the future. Now, there's that. Another thing that I see within this chart that I think is rather significant is the fact that the sun within this chart is essentially in a square relationship with Neptune. And that characterizes, it's 11:11, people, make a wish. And that is likely to characterize the entirety of this year ahead, this Sun-Neptune. Sun-Neptune is a combination for sick kings, men who die as a result of being sick, is one thing that Sun-Neptune represents. It's a combination for sick, weak, impotent leadership. Is another thing with Sun-Neptune. The lying king, the lying man is another thing for Sun-Neptune. I remember, it was obvious to the world that Joe Biden was deteriorating at an exponential rate, mind you. It was obvious that Joe Biden's health was deteriorating at an exponential rate in the front of everyone, for every single person to see. And somehow, the news and the Democratic Party, and I'm not saying this as a person who even has voting rights in the United States of America, because I definitely don't. But it was so extraordinary to see the lengths that the top down that the government went through to make it seem as if Joe Biden wasn't turning into a bucket of gravel in the front of everybody. It was crazy. And it was also considered to be blasphemous, because you couldn't be an upstanding citizen who believed in the free world and also think that Joe Biden was sick. You just couldn't. So it was impossible for us to comment on the fact that this man is clearly being flushed down the toilet in the front of our eyes and still being pushed on the stage for everybody to see him, because to have said that meant that you were a racist, anti-Israel, anti this thing, anti that thing, all of the things, because you were commenting on the fact that Joe Biden was deteriorating. And now it's okay to say, because now you can't even see Joe Biden. Where's Joe Biden? I haven't seen him since the last time you saw him. But now everybody's more of the opinion of, oh yes, let's think about it with compassion, because, now he's so sick and he's so this, and let's think positive thoughts for him. But why, when he was sick and we all saw it and were saying it, we couldn't say it? So similarly, at that time, I think there was also a Sun-Neptune story in the sky going on. And I think that I remember the day that Joe Biden had to give Kamala Harris power over the entire United States of America. He was said to have some colon exam. And then for one day, that was the day of the eclipse, if my memory serves well. It was shortly after he became president. One day, I think it was a Friday, there was a Sun, Neptune something, and there was a solar eclipse. And a couple days before, I said, it looks as if there's something happening to the ruler of the country, and as a result of that, there's some switching of power. And by the Friday, Kamala Harris had the keys to the kingdom for 24 hours because Joe Biden was indisposed of, because apparently he was checking out his colon. So, saying all that, here we see it again, Sun, Neptune, this time not simply within the 6-month auspices of an eclipse, but this time within the 12-month auspices of this Capricorn Ingress chart. So one can only imagine and one can only wonder why this should be the case for the year of 2025. Who knows? But we see that happening as well. And because this is happening in such a large way, and because this is the Sun-Neptune for the entire world, it's not just the Sun-Neptune for America, but it's the Sun-Neptune for the entire world, we can also imagine or posit that this also has to do with some larger theme of sickness, deterioration, disappointment, being a larger universal sort of theme. So I think it's something worth us keeping our eye on, because Sun Neptune, from a mundane astrological perspective, has to do with a day of sickness or a day of disappointment. When you stretch that over 12 months, because it shows up in the Capricorn Ingress chart, it could have to do with a year of sickness, a year of disappointment. So I think this is something for us to be quite mindful of. In this very Neptunian year that we have coming up, I think that it's important for us to know what our internal resources are. And I'm stepping away from this for a moment, and I'm just talking collectively. It's important for us to know what our internal resources are, because in Neptunian periods of time, you can find yourself agreeing to things that you normally wouldn't agree to under other circumstances. You can find yourself allowing certain things to happen that normally wouldn't be allowable within your life. You can find yourself being in a situation that you don't even realize you're entering, but before you know it, there you are in the heart of that, and you can't really do anything to change it. So I think that it is important for us collectively, as we move into this next level of time, to practice extraordinary discernment and to practice extraordinary discrimination. Because when a period of time is Neptunian, not only do people from the top down try to pull the wool over our eyes, but we ourselves, we are naturally more inclined to be more gullible. And as a result of that, we find ourselves in situations that don't really serve our best interest. So Sun Neptune could be a very nebulous time, but within that nebulosity, we also should try to figure out what are our own anchors within life. As the world around us goes in the centripetal vortex of the gurgler of the toilet bowl of life, how do we continue to hold a sense of anchoring within ourselves, a sense of government within ourselves, a sense of order within ourselves, so that the chaos that's occurring around us doesn't impact us as strongly as it would impact somebody who does not lead the sort of reflective lifestyle that we ourselves are supposed to be leading? These are the questions that I think are going to be very important for us to ask and to consider as we move into the year ahead. I think that it is worth mentioning that finally, one of the things that we see within this chart that's really significant to me is the fact that we have Mercury at the bendings. And we don't just have Mercury at the bendings, we have Mercury at the southern bending. And the southern bending is the first square to the south node moving forward in zodiacal motion. And we have Mercury there. Mercury is representing the children of the United States of America this year. And I always look at these charts and I look for these children whenever I'm looking at the US chart, because you know, the children of this country need someone to look out for them. And Mercury here is at the southern bending, and the southern bending is a place of sacrifice. It's a place of sacrifice. It's kind of like the 12th house, insofar as the 12th house is also a place of sacrifice. The southern bending is a place of sacrifice. And so the question that arises naturally is, what sort of position are we putting the children of the United States of America in this year as far as sacrifice is concerned? How are those children showing up as the sacrificial lambs, basically? And what is the agenda that is being promoted or supported as those children are given a more challenging hand or are dealt a more challenging hand? So the fact that we have these children as the highest elevated planet within this chart says that the issues of the children are also going to be a primary theme or a primary obligation or primary and central consideration for the government within this year. And that is going to be true. But similarly, what's also going to be true is issues surrounding land and real estate are going to be primary and central themes for the government this year, because that same Mercury is ruling the 4th house. And similarly, debt, once again, debt, because Mercury is also ruling the 8th house, is going to be a central theme and consideration. So in general, money in general of the country, of the people, health in general of the country and the people, the fact that the country and the people might find themselves in a challenging health set of circumstances that might directly impact the digestive system is another thing that could be potentially problematic within this coming period of time. You know, At this moment, there's a chikungunya outbreak in Cuba. And for those of you who don't know, chikungunya is a mosquito-transmitted disease, and it affects the digestive system, but it also affects the joints. And as I look at this moon in Capricorn, afflicted by the Chiron, afflicted by the Jupiter, I'm thinking about a digestive issue that can very well affect the gut, but that can also affect the knees, the joints. These are some of the things that we see manifesting within the chart for this year ahead. Money, top issue number one. The disillusion and the loss of money, top issue number one. Our health and how that health is impacted and how that health is, how the issues that arise within the health of the nation this year are ultimately also going to affect the money of the nation this year. Top issue, top priority for sure. Health in general, massive, massive, massive topic. I've said some of the symptoms that I think might be associated with that issue as well. The children and how the children are finding themselves on the shitty end of the stick this year. And once again, as the sacrificial lambs, since those children are at the southern bending, is also seeming to be a huge consideration that we need to pay attention to. Real estate, other big topic that's going to be occupying the government, as well as debt in general, other big topic that's going to be occupying the government and government spaces. Within all of that, it's a wonderful time to pick up a book and learn something new, because we're definitely going to be needing to be more reliant on our wits within this coming period of time. And because why? It is just seeming to be a period of financial instability, as is indicated by the parts of fortune in a square relationship with Uranus, or rather the Uranus in a square relationship with the parts of fortune. So we need to do whatever we can do in order to maintain a sense of our own internal sovereignty. And in the words of Benjamin Franklin, if you invest your sovereignty into your brain, nobody can take that away from you. Thank you, everybody, for joining me once again for yet another, hopefully insightful look at the year ahead. I sincerely hope that you got something out of it. I know I got something out of it. I don't really like doing mundane astrology. It's not really the thing that floats my boat as an astrological professional. But every time I do it, I'm reminded of how important it is within the larger unfolding of our astrological practice. So thank you so much for being a part of that. Once again, the big thing happening here at the Oraculos School of Astrology in the month of January 2026 is we have our upcoming Horary Astrology certification program, which is the first of its kind. I've been teaching it for years, almost a decade now, but this is the first time we're packaging it in this way as its own certification program. I sincerely hope that you choose to join us in this, because this is going to be my last big hoorah from a teaching perspective, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm also excited about leaving the world a generation of astrologers who are genuinely going to make a difference. That has been my impact within the astrological community for at least near to a decade now at this point, and it will continue to be my impact through the people who I've taught. And so I sincerely hope that you decide to join us in our upcoming Horary Astrology certification program, which is the gateway to everything that we do here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. I love you so much. And once again, if you haven't subscribed to the Oraculos podcast already, please make sure to do that wherever you find us on the internet. And I will see you in the very near future, all things considered. Have a wonderful one, everybody. TTYL. I love you all. Bye for now.